Good afternoon. This hearing of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now come to order. Today is Saturday, October 22nd. We're here in Westview High School in Avondale, Arizona, and the time is 1:35 p.m. Let's all please rise and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, it's good to see so many of you on such a beautiful Saturday, taking time to participate in the process. We really appreciate it. We apologize for the delay. We had to wait till the technology caught up with us, and we're not streaming live today, unfortunately, over the internet, but it's all recorded, and it will be uploaded to our site later, so you'll be able to watch a recording, and so will anyone else. We're just not streaming live. So let me introduce other folks at the table. I'm Chairman Mathis. I'm the only commissioner here today. The other commissioners will watch the recording at their convenience. We're all taking turns going across the state to about 26 different locations to host hearings, and we're taking turns going to different ones. So I think this is like number 13 now in the list, so we're about halfway through. But the other commissioners are Vice Chair Freeman, Vice Chair Herrera, Commissioner McNulty, and Commissioner Sturts. Other folks at the table today, we have legal counsel Joe Canefield, our mapping consultant Corinne Belak. We have a court reporter, Marty Herder, who is taking a transcript of today's proceedings. Buck Forst is our Chief Technology Officer. Ray Bladine is our Executive Director. Christina Gomez is our Deputy Executive Director. And shout out for Christina, apparently. And Karen Herman is our Public Outreach Coordinator today. So please feel free to talk to any of our staff should you need anything throughout this. They'll be happy to help you with any questions you might have. We also have, by federal law, a translator here today. We're required to provide translation and interpretive services for anyone who might need that. And today we have Melissa Alvarado, who will be translating into Spanish for us. Is Melissa here? Oh, great. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone and just giving a few words of welcome in both English and Spanish, that would be great.
Chair Mathis, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, in accordance with the Voting Rights Act, a translator or interpreter will be available at the public hearing in order to provide translating or interpreting services that might be needed for those citizens that need translating or interpreting services. Please contact the translator or interpreter present at the meeting so that he or she can assist you. Will the interpreter please raise his or her hand so that you can be identified? Presidenta Mathis, comisionados, damas y caballeros, de acuerdo con la Ley de Derechos Electorales, un traductor e intérprete estará disponible en todas las reuniones de audiencia pública a fin de proporcionar la traducción o interpretación que puedan ser necesitados por los ciudadanos que necesiten servicios de traducción o interpretación. Por favor, contacte al traductor o intérprete presente en esta audiencia para que él o ella le pueda ayudar. Por favor, los intérpretes levanten su mano para ser reconocidos. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll be getting to the main purpose of the hearing very shortly, which is public comment. The whole goal of these hearings is to hear from the public and obtain input on the draft congressional and draft legislative maps that the Commission approved. And we're very much looking forward to any specific input you can give us. So the more specific you can be about lines, the better. We're happy to hear if you think they should be moved. If you like them the way they are, we like to hear that too. So please feel free to be specific, as I said, when you come up and talk to us later. So public comment will begin in a little bit after our presentation from Corinne, but I wanted to remind everyone that if you do want to address us today, please fill out a yellow request to speak form so that we'll have that to call your name. You'll be coming up to the microphone and giving your input that way. I will also note that if you do not wish to address the commission in public, you can fill out a blue sheet, which should be in the back of your packets of information. And that will be entered into the record just the same as it would if you stood at the podium. So feel free to provide written comments if you're more comfortable doing that. Otherwise, we look forward to hearing from you later on in the meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Corinne Bielak, who will give us a presentation and overview on the process.
Good afternoon. I am Corinne Kabina Bielak with Strategic Telemetry. I'm happy to be here this afternoon to discuss the draft congressional and legislative maps presented by the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. The goal of these meetings is to hear your comments about the draft maps, so thank you for taking the time to attend. The draft maps you'll see today are currently under a 30-day review period so that the Commission can hear your opinion about these maps. Before getting into the maps, I want to give you a quick overview of the redistricting process. Arizona's redistricting process is governed by the state constitution as amended by voters in 2000 with the passage of Proposition 106. It stipulates that Arizona's Independent Redistricting Commission redraw Arizona's congressional and legislative districts to reflect the results of the most recent census. So due to the 2010 census, Arizona gained a congressional seat, going from 8 to 9 seats. So what are the requirements of the state constitution via Prop 106? The new district boundaries must comply with the U.S. Constitution and the Voting Rights Act, and they must have equal population. And criteria A and B are federally mandated. And then to the extent practicable, the districts must be compact and contiguous, respect communities of interest, use visible geographic features, city, town, and county boundaries, and undivided census tracts, and favor competitive districts where no significant detriment to other goals. So just a bit about the Voting Rights Act. Arizona's congressional and legislative districts must receive pre-clearance or approval from the Department of Justice or a federal court under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act before they can take effect. To get pre-clearance, Arizona must demonstrate that the new districts do not discriminate against minority voters in purpose or effect, which means there can be no intentional or accidental discrimination. So under Section 5, Arizona's redistricting plans cannot be retrogressive. The plans cannot weaken or reduce minority voters' rights. And the presence of discrimination can be determined by analyzing population data and election results. So before I move on, we do have a presentation via video from Bruce Adelson, who is advising the Commission on the Voting Rights Act. So if you bear with me for a moment, we will show this video.
My name is Bruce Adelson. I wanted to spend a few moments with you to talk a little bit about redistricting. I was a senior attorney for the United States Department of Justice in 2002 when the department and my team objected to or blocked your legislative redistricting plan. It's very important to understand that under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is a federal law, Arizona must obtain approval or pre-clearance from the Department of Justice or from a federal court in Washington, D.C. for your redistricting plan to go into effect. Under Section 5, under federal law, your redistricting plan cannot discriminate against the rights of minority voters. It cannot retrogress their opportunity to elect whom they want. This is a federal requirement. The federal requirement supersedes and takes precedence over all state requirements, whether they're competitiveness, compactness, contiguity, or keeping communities of interest together. Those are all very important. But if they conflict with the Voting Rights Act and conflict with the one person, one vote requirement of the U.S. Constitution, then they must be revised. The requirements of the Voting Rights Act and one person, one vote are paramount. There cannot be any retrogression or discrimination against the rights of minority voters. If there is, the Department of Justice will not approve the redistricting plan. That's what we said when we wrote our letter in May 2002, and we objected to what the Redistricting Commission 9 years ago had done. We found that the redistricting plan, the legislative plan, had discriminated against the rights of minority voters. And under federal law, that plan could not go into effect. So that as you contemplate redistricting and look at the various maps that have been provided by the Commission, it's very important to understand that the federal requirements under our system of law and government take priority. Those requirements cannot be minimized and must be complied with for your redistricting plan to go into effect next year to enable you to have your legislative and congressional elections. I hope that my perspective as being a former federal law enforcement officer has been helpful, and I wish you continued success with your redistricting process. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, Bruce Adelson is advising the Commission on matters of the Voting Rights Act and the pre-clearance. Just one moment while we get the presentation back up. Thank you. He'd been with us for the previous several hearings, so that's the first time we were testing the video, so thanks for your patience. Perfect. So here we go. So just a little more about the background of the Commission, moving into the timeline for the Commission. Earlier this year, as step one, the Commission was established. The Commissioners were appointed following a thorough screening process and serve in a voluntary role for the state of Arizona. Of course, we have Chairman Colleen Mathis with us today, and you can see the other Commissioners listed here, which Chairman Mathis mentioned. Step two of this process was the first round of hearings. So before drawing a single line that you'll see on these draft maps, the Commission held 23 public hearings around the state in July and August to get input from members of the public about issues relevant to redistricting. Anything from comments on communities of interest, geography, minority voting rights, and competitiveness. At that point, after the hearings wrapped up, the mapping process actually began. So per Proposition 106, the Commission started with a blank slate, which we'll talk about a little bit more when you see the maps. They then divided the state into equal population and compact grid-like districts, and then they approved a grid map on August 18th. Since adopting the grid maps, the Commission has met more than 25 times to consider adjustments to the grid to accommodate all of the state constitutional criteria. And during this time, they also received additional comments from the public and draft maps from the public as well. Approval of the draft maps, which you will see today. So on October 3rd, the Commission approved draft congressional maps, a draft congressional map that incorporated changes based on all of the constitutional criteria. They then approved a draft legislative map on October 10th. Which brings us to the second round of hearings, which we're currently in the process of completing. So we're visiting 25 towns and cities to share the draft maps and receive additional public input during the months of October and November. And then step 5, the final maps will be adopted. So upon completion of the public comment period, the AIRC will adopt the maps. And then step 6, which Bruce touched on, is the pre-clearance process. So because Arizona is subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the district maps must be approved by the Federal Department of Justice or the federal court in Washington, D.C. before they can be used in Arizona elections. So just moving on to the maps now. I want to give you a quick overview of how the Commission came to the draft map you see today. So we'll show you the progression of the maps in a series of slides now. So the map you see here on the screen was the congressional map that was approved by the last Redistricting Commission and most recently used in the 2010 election. Per Proposition 106, the Commission was required to start with a blank slate, which you see here. They weren't able to take into consideration any previous election districts or incumbents. The congressional grid map that I mentioned, and again, per Proposition 106, the Commission started with a grid map. However, the grid map took only into consideration 2 of the 6 constitutional criteria, equal population and compactness. So in August, the Commission asked that 2 grid maps be drawn, and on August 18th, they agreed on option 2, which you see on the screen here. So after more than 25 meetings, the Commission voted to approve the draft map, which is on the screen here. In addition to taking into consideration the 6 constitutional criteria, the Commission took into consideration from from public comments, which they received at a number of different ways, whether it was through public hearings, comments at the public meetings, comments mailed, emailed, hand-delivered, faxed, telephoned into the commission, and all told, over 5,000 comments helped to develop this draft map that you see here today. So as you see, I'm going to just go through some of the highlights of the draft map as it stands. It creates 2 predominantly rural districts. It creates 3 border districts. It creates 3 districts in the greater Tucson region. It creates 5 districts that are entirely in Maricopa County. It avoids splitting Arizona's Indian reservations. And it creates 2 districts where minority voters have an opportunity to elect their candidate of choice. Excuse me. So moving on to the legislative maps, which we'll go through now. So Arizona has 30 legislative districts, and each district elects 1 senator and 2 House members. Actually, I'm so sorry, let me back up a little bit. Much like the congressional maps, the legislative maps followed the same path, and I'll show you the progressions. I was jumping ahead a little bit there. So this is actually, the map you see on the screen is the the legislative map that the commission approved in 2000 and was most recently used in the 2010 election. So this was the original map from the last commission. And for Proposition 106, again, the commission started with the blank slate, the blank slate map, which you see here. They then moved on to the legislative draft map. I'm sorry, backing up again. They moved on to the grid map, which was approved in August. So similar to the congressional map, the grid map took into consideration equal population and compactness, only 2 of the 6 constitutional criteria. Which now takes us to the legislative draft map. I was a little excited, I guess. So, which leads us to this draft map. So again, as I already said, Arizona has 30 legislative districts, a senator from each district, and 2 House members. Some other points about the legislative draft map that I want to share with you today. The commission definitely took into consideration population growth and reduction. So the old districts ranged from about 155,000 residents to 378,000 residents. The current draft map you see today ranges from 207,000 residents to 215 in population. Again, to comply with the Voting Rights Act, the draft map includes 10 districts in which minority voters should have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. And the draft also includes 3 districts wholly within Pima County and 3 additional southern Arizona districts, 17 districts primarily within Maricopa County, and 9 districts that are primarily rural. So moving on to the reason we're here tonight, as I mentioned, the commission definitely wants to hear your input and what you have to say about these draft maps. There are many ways to make sure your voice can be heard. To just go through a few, you can fill out a request to speak form at any public hearing and provide the commission with your input. Examples of input might include your thoughts on any of the constitutional criteria or any specific recommendations or comments about the draft legislative and congressional maps. You can submit your input by speaking at a hearing. You can fill out a public input form on the at a hearing or on the AIRC website. And you can visit us at azredistricting.org or call 602-542-5221 or toll free at 855-733-7478. So those are the ways that you can provide us with your input about the draft maps. And also really important to the commission is to make sure that you can stay connected throughout this process. So the screenshot that you see here is the commission's website. The arrow highlights a couple of key areas of interest. So under meetings, you can find meetings, future and past. So if you're curious about what the deliberation that went into developing these draft maps, you can go back and view hearings by date. If you'd like to make comments, you can fill out the public input form, which is highlighted here. You can also view maps, obviously, on the commission's website. So there are 2 arrows for maps. The arrows down at the bottom will take you directly to the draft maps. And once you click on the links there, this is the screen that will pop up for you. Of course, most people want to see the draft map, so this is the best place to go. Once you click on the maps, you'll see you have a menu of choices. And might be a little small for you to see, but on the screen it's very clear. Basically, these are the different file types that the maps are saved in: JPEG, PDF, and also a KMZ Google file, which we'll talk a little bit more about. That's the link, the Google Maps link is circled in red, and that will take you to a Google Maps view of the draft maps. So you click on the KMZ Google Map file, which will bring you to this view. So Google Maps is a great way to view the maps because you can zoom in and out to a specific area that you're interested in. Here you see the draft congressional map, and on the left, just to point out what the left-hand column is, that's a series of filters that are laid upon the map. So you can click on and off of those checkboxes, basically, to highlight different colors, to take out names of counties. It just helps you get a clearer view of the area that you're looking to focus on. So that's a good way to play with the map and manipulate it a bit. So now I want to show you a zoomed in look of the map. So this is as you zoom into the KMZ Google map. This slide you see here shows some districts surrounding Maricopa County as an example. Again, you have the ability to zoom in and out to view down to street names, block names, and you can see exactly where those boundaries run, in case you have any questions about that, of course. So those are the maps today, and just again, as I wrap up, I just want to highlight the Commission's website one more time for you, azredistricting.org. On the website, again, you can draw your own maps to submit to the Commission, watch meetings, and find details about future meetings as well. And I also encourage you, if you're into social media, to follow us on Twitter at the hashtag AIRC, and to friend the Commission on Facebook, where you can get up-to-the-minute updates via Twitter or Facebook about what's going on with the Commission. So that's a great way to stay connected. So again, in conclusion, just thanks for coming out this afternoon. A final point on these maps is that, of course, you have copies in the packet that you received, and I hope that you all notice we have the maps blown up on the wall in the back as well, and that's a great way to be able to view the maps even more closely. And of course, I'm available after the public comment period if you have any questions regarding the maps. You can grab any of the staff as well who can give you pointers on how to view them, where to find them on the Commission's website, or anything along those lines. So I look forward to speaking with you all, and thanks again for attending this afternoon.
Thank you, Corinne. I have to congratulate our staff. I'm not sure if the changes to our website was a recent phenomenon, but it looks great, the new layout. That looks really good. So thank you, Buck, and anybody else who helped on that. So we now move into the public comment phase of the hearing, and just a few ground rules to remember. When you come up to the podium after you hear your name, please state your name and spell your last name into the microphone as closely as you can, because we want to all be able to hear you really well. And the spelling gives our transcriber an accurate accounting in the record, so that's helpful. If you could also say, if you're representing a group, please let us know who that is. Otherwise, if it's just yourself, you can say self. And please say the city or county in which you reside. You don't need to give us anything more than that in terms of where you live, just the city or county. And as I stated earlier, please be as specific as you can on your comments. That's very helpful, and we're seeking your input, so we look forward to hearing any ideas and suggestions you have for improvement. And with that, I think we can begin. So our first speaker is State Representative Anna Tovar, representing Self.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Representative Anna Tovar, T-O-V-A-R, represent District 13, City of Tolleson, representing South. I just really quickly wanted to comment on the process that has been called into play this past week at the legislature. I, for one, am against the legislator forming a committee, a joint legislative committee on redistricting. I feel that this process should be a fair and open process for all citizens, and by establishing that joint committee at the state legislature really silences the voice of our citizens. I feel it's very important that our citizens are here, able to participate in this process in a very independent way. When the state legislature steps in and tries to have these hearings in one way or another, it's definitely a step in the wrong direction in influencing our state from having that open process. So that's one thing I would like to say about that. The second thing I want to address is my district, District 19. I congratulate you on all the hard work that you've done and for being here on a Saturday afternoon. My district is a great district, and I love representing District 13 right now. The map that you have drafted is a map that I'm very supportive of. I feel that it gives my constituents a fair representation, and it allows for people to run in this district that truly want to represent Avondale, Tolleson, Maryville, and West Phoenix area. If there was something that I would change on this map, it might be, having more of the border on the east portion of the district, and maybe lowering the district boundaries up on the northern portion of our district. But otherwise, I feel it plays as a fair representation of what this district should look like. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Georgia Lord, Mayor of Goodyear.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before the Commission to relay a message given to me by our citizens. My name is Georgia, G-E-O-R-G-I-A, Lord like in heaven, L-O-R-D, and I am the mayor of the city of Goodyear. Our council is elected at large on a nonpartisan ballot. Our city government adopts ordinances and policies, weighing our decisions based on the desires and the needs of our entire population, which is just under 67,000, and it build out will be approximately 635,000 people. Many citizens have reached out to me expressing a deep concern and disappointment in discovering a second change in the redistricting map that essentially splits our city in half at the river, resulting in moving our southern boundaries to another district. Reading over your bullet points of redistricting criteria and justification to modify these district boundaries, I would like to address one of your redistricting criteria, and that is, there is no significant detriment to our goals. Many of our residents feel the movement of our southern population is a detriment to many of our goals set by our citizens in developing the future of Goodyear. The mere movement of our southern neighbors to a different district is already forming a feeling of disconnect among our residents who have played significant roles in creating our vision and goals for our future city center. Our citizens spoke about their contributions in helping create a specific area plan for the development of our future city. They feel the continuing conversation of developing the city center and the needs of our community will be weakened by the different goals set in the new district. As a city, we have fought the common battle of Arizona's typical walled-in communities by communicating and joining hands to address and solve local, state, and national issues for our city as one voice. And now we are witnessing a virtual wall being constructed dividing our citizens, and they are concerned. To help you better understand the makeup of our southern area, it is comprised of many residential neighborhoods, but they play a significant role by their location adjacent to one of our large employment corridors that parallels our Goodyear Airport, our baseball stadium, and just a little ad here, home of the Cactus League of the Cincinnati Reds and Cleveland Indians, and the land for our city center, all of which is an execution of interest and joint effort from our citizens from both the northern and southern boundaries of the city. And finally, we respectfully ask that you reconsider the decision in splitting our district boundaries at the river, which takes out an elongated, compact, but continuous path of land from our northern border to our southern and especially separating the Australia community and a portion of the Canyon Trails neighborhood, which has a school district that will be separated, south of I-10, and moving a part of our city into the Southern Arizona district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sherry Loretano, a City Council member from City of Goodyear.
You got the whole city here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Sherry Loretano, last name's Lauritano. I am a member also elected at large for the Goodyear City Council. And I'm the sole representative who was elected south of I-10. After this, I'm going to go attend our GAIN event, which is our community and our neighborhood event at our stadium. And leading up to this, talking to my neighbors, just here and there at the Girl Scout meeting, at the Boy Scout meeting up in Estrella. My community is Estrella Mountain Ranch. And I don't know, maybe the committee didn't realize what our community is made up. We are not rural. We do not belong, that section of Goodyear does not belong in a rural district. We don't belong with Southern Arizona. I noticed you split Yuma and you split Goodyear. Yuma is a rural agricultural area. Our area is not. For example, and many neighbors are just like me. We have 2 grade schools up just in Estrella Mountain Ranch and a high school up there, and also Canyon Trails is split. I've lived in Goodyear since 1995, and for those 16 years, I've commuted downtown as an attorney. I was with the city of Phoenix for 15 years as a prosecutor down there. I have no connection with Southern Arizona other than I went to U of A undergrad. But overall, we don't shop there. Our economic interests are not with the southern part of the state. We work heavily with GPAC to bring in businesses to the West Valley. We work with the West Valley Corridor. We work with Peoria closely. We work with Glendale closely. We work with the West Valley cities. Many of my citizens and many of my neighbors and friends are very concerned that our representation on both the congressional and on the legislative districts are going to be based out of Yuma as it sits right now, or out of the Southern Arizona area. As I said, although they have some different concerns than us, and I do speak totally non-political, like I said, we're nonpartisan. I'm looking at the streets, I'm looking at the concerns, I'm looking at the issues. Our council members are highly involved with the Maricopa Association of Governments. Transportation is a regional issue, again, with Maricopa County, not with the southern area. I sit on the MAG Domestic Violence Committee and have sat on it for several years. And several of our other council members, again, are very involved with the Maricopa County area. What I would recommend for these 2 districts, because you said be specific, we didn't actually, on your map, it didn't actually go down far enough, but if you look to see where Estrella Mountain Ranch is, if you would take that area in and keep it with the rest of Goodyear, and that would also keep the Canyon Trails area in, bring that box down, and perhaps you could move the line up in Yuma. And I understand all the Voting Rights Acts, and I don't have that specific information, but I was looking at that, and I think that would keep Yuma together, and I don't know if they've had the similar problems separating their community, and it would keep our community together as well. 10 years ago, we were under 20,000 people. Now we're at 66,000 people. We have had enormous growth. We are the area, Goodyear is where the regional mall is going to be built for the West Valley. So as you can see, we really don't have those rural concerns, and it was really important to our constituents that we be moved in together. And I would make the same basic recommendations, not with the specific lines, but if we could move, and you can see on your map where there's 2 lakes there, and Estrella Mountain goes down there when you look at the road. If you could take in that part of and keep Goodyear together as a whole for those maps, and we would really appreciate it. And I think it would serve the citizens of Arizona best and the citizens of Goodyear. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Enrique Medina Ochoa, Town Manager for the town of Tusayan, if I'm saying that right. Is that right? Tusayan? Tusayan?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Welcome to Avondale. I reside in Avondale, Arizona, here in Garden Lakes, about 3 or 4 minutes away. I've lived here for the last 10 or 12 years. I am the new town manager in Tusayan, Arizona. That's how they pronounce it. I started pronouncing it Tusayan, and they corrected me. They said, too much of a Spanish flavor there. But it is a Native American word. I've asked around to see if I could get a better pronunciation. So I've gone with the local pronunciation, which is Tusayan, Arizona. It's an honor for me to be here to address you. Again, welcome. As you know, I had the honor of being the first executive director of the Redistricting Commission about 10 years ago. And then my wife decided to go work in Santa Barbara, and I had to follow her. It's a nice place there. But we're back. We're back over here and doing some great things. Just wanted to address the legislative maps, particularly. We received them recently, and specifically there is a division of the Grand Canyon Village in Tusayan. And members of the council and the mayor have asked me to come before you to express our desire to have that together. That the community really, it's a community of interest, and it should not be separated. Tusayan students go to the school that is inside the Grand Canyon. The Lions Club, members of Tusayan go into the Grand Canyon. For the Rotary Club, it's the Grand Canyon Rotary Club, but it encompasses people from Tusayan and the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau has representatives from inside Grand Canyon Village and Tusayan. So basically it's one community, and at this time, even though there is an 8-mile separation, Tusayan is right at the entrance, right where you pay to go into the Grand Canyon, and then you drive another 8 miles to get into the actual residential area of Grand Canyon Village. It's still the same people. It's all the same people. It's the same, all of the local residents have a bypass lane to get into the Grand Canyon so that they can go shop, and there's a nice general store there. And likewise, people come, they live and they interchange. Everything is interchangeable. It's all one community is what the bottom line is. So I just wanted to express that to you because I know that you're looking at commonalities. You're looking at various issues that you have to address. But in that particular case, it's one community. It's not like in Yuma. And I won't address that right now. Anyway, thank you very much. And we'll put our comments in writing, and we'll be more specific, but I wanted to welcome you to Avondale, wanted to thank you, wanted to have the honor of seeing you personally, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Welcome back to Arizona, too. Our next speaker is Jim Buster, councilman, and you'll have to tell us where you're from. After Jim will be Wally Campbell, followed by Gary Gelser.
Thank you. I am Jim Buster. I'm a city councilman from the city of Avondale, and I wondered really if I really wanted to speak today or not, because really more than anything else I want to kvetch. I know you've got a difficult job because you have 6 criteria, and frankly the U.S. Voting Rights Act just blows everything to smithereens because you have to have equal population, you do, geographically compact and contiguous, some you do, some you don't. Respective communities of interest, some yes, some no. Respect for geographic features and boundaries, some yes and some no. Competitive, of course, some yes and some no. I represent, like I say, the city of Avondale, and I've been living in the city of Avondale for 12 years. One thing I liked about our situation, and here's the kvetching part, we're represented by 3 different legislative districts. I like that. Of course, you probably want them to be all in one, but I like that. I know the legislative process, having been a legislator, having worked down at the legislature, and it's nice to have not only minority representation, but majority representation as well. With this district, we lose that, unfortunately, and that's, to me, a loss. The only other thing I would say, this, having been a member of the legislature when the legislature last did redistricting, and having been a member of the Judiciary Committee where it started that process, this doesn't take politics out of redistricting and redrawing lines. I can tell you for a fact. I've been there. I've seen it. Yeah, the process in 1991 or whenever it was very, very political. But so is this. We drew maps. Those maps were litigated. You'll draw maps. Your maps will be litigated. There's no escaping it. It's because people are political by nature. And I don't think you're ever going to find a perfect solution. But the one thing I liked about the legislature drawing the maps was that at least the legislature was elected. Having said that, I know you've got an impossible task in front of you, and thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Wally Campbell, council member from Goodyear.
Thank you. My name is Wally Campbell, C-A-M-P-B-E-L-L. I reside in the city of Goodyear, and I would like to call to the attention of the commissioner a few details which you may or may not know. The city of Goodyear is 191 square miles. It's about 35 miles from our northernmost point to our southernmost point, so we're a very elongated north-south community. Our city has always prided itself in being one community, and we have always been very cognizant of the fact that I-10 cuts us in half. We have the Estrella Mountains to our south. We have another community of Mobile over the Estrella Mountains that we annex that is part of our city. And we've tried hard to include everyone from every section of our city to do things together and to be one community, one family. We feel your first map did not split us, so that's why you did not hear anything from any of us in Goodyear. And then when we saw the second map, we noticed at that point you had split our city. All we're asking is that you reconsider your decision. Please keep us together because we do everything together in the West Valley. We're very close to Litchfield Park. We're very close to Avondale. We're very close to Buckeye. And we're very close to Glendale and Peoria. We're all trying to work as one unit to do the very best we can for the West Valley, which will be the fastest growing region of Maricopa County. In Goodyear, we have a lot of land left to develop, and we're planning for the future too. But we would appreciate it if you would rethink and redraw the lines only to keep us together so that we're not separated. Because I know we did mention that we are concerned that we may have some school districts that will be separated out, and we need to check that out as well. We don't want that to happen to our city. Thank you very much. And may I thank your staff for the wonderful job with the handouts and the setup. I know it's extremely hard to travel from place to place, but we as citizens do thank you.
Yeah, they are not thanked enough, so thank you for recognizing them. And thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Gary Gelzer, City Council member from the City of Goodyear.
Madam Chairman, my name is Gary Gelzer. Last name is spelled G-E-L-Z-E-R. My mayor and my fellow council people have basically told you what the City of Goodyear is about and why it's special and its unique geographic circumstances. What I want to say is from everything I've read in the last several weeks with the action of the legislature, with Democrats and Republicans both crying out saying this is terrible, I believe you are doing a great job because it's political and everybody doesn't like it, and if you are, somebody's going to have a compromise. My comments are concerning the fact that you have placed the City of Goodyear in two rural districts, and the City of Goodyear is a first or second ring suburb of the Phoenix metropolitan area. The city is growing at a rate of, it was growing at 10%, now it's continues to grow at 5%. For the last 3 years, we've added 500 new houses each year, and we are the fourth largest or fastest growing city in Maricopa County in the state of Arizona. I believe that you have violated compact and contiguous districts by aligning us with Yuma. I believe you have violated respect for communities of interest because our interests lie to the east in the greater Phoenix metropolitan area and do not really lie to the west in with the appropriate Yuma district. I also think that you have broken up the visible geographic boundaries. And I am a trained geographer and cartographer, and so I speak from both a political orientation and a professional background on this. My final comment is, if you align us to the east and you keep us with two separate districts, that, as Councilman Buster said, is a benefit to the city, because then we will have more representation and not less representation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christopher Kalmus, representing Self from Avondale.
Good morning. Again, my name is Christopher Kalmus. It's K-A-L-L-M-E-S. And don't really have anything prepared. It's more just kind of a couple of points to bring up. And I'd like to second what the council members have been bringing up as far as the contiguousness and the geographic boundaries. The legislative districts, I live in Avondale, and so I'm actually pretty happy with it because it seems like Avondale has been pretty much inclusive. The city boundaries don't seem to have been violated at all. So I do like that. What I did have issue with is, at least with the congressional district, is being included with Congressional District 3. Because again, that puts us with Yuma, puts us with Southern Arizona, and our community of interest absolutely is the Southwest Phoenix area. Goodyear, Avondale, Tullison, Buckeye, we have a pretty tight-knit community. We all spend money. There's, we do have borders, but the borders, I believe, are pretty blurred because people go back and forth. There's not really any issues with that. And I think that keeping those cities together in the same districts, or at least splitting them between districts 7 and 8, would be beneficial for all of those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bobby Watts, representing Self from Goodyear.
Bobby, B-O-B-B-I-E, Watts, W-A-T-T-S, like the light bulb. Good afternoon, Chairperson Mathis and Commissioner Sturts. Welcome to the West Valley. This is the nexus of the two largest districts, CD2 and CD7, the current districts in the state of Arizona. The CD2 has 972,839 people. CD7 has 855,769. Now you had to whittle that down to I think 710,000. So you took 262,000 people from CD2, and actually it is now mostly CD8. CD7 has 855,769, and of course you whittled it down to 710,000 also. Regarding compactness, you compacted CD8 fairly well, but CD3 now has a perimeter of 1,810 miles. CD8 is 248, but I think if you would cut off the little projections, it would be even smaller. In the community of interest, I'm from Goodyear, and we share common interests with Litchfield Park, Surprise, Peoria, Luke Air Force Base, Buckeye, and we have common interests with that portion of CD8 East, and Goodyear is divided 50% in 8 and 50% in 3. Interstate 10 is a dividing barrier. Goodyear should actually be all in CD8. Geographic boundaries, I noticed you put the Goodyear Airport in CD3 and the prison in CD8. I have some short recommendations. I'd like to, if you would renumber the districts using the old numbers with a preponderance of the old district, because it's hard for us, the voters, to go from CD3 to CD7 and CD8 to CD2. And this is one you've heard before. Put Prescott and Verde Valley in CD1 because Prescott was the first capital of Arizona, and I think they deserve a CD be the first congressional district. And we would like for you to include all of Goodyear in CD8 and Legislative District 13. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Woody Thomas, representing South from Litchfield Park.
Good afternoon. This is Woody Thomas from Litchfield Park. Last name is Thomas. My real name is James Woodfin, for the record. Former mayor of Litchfield Park, served 3 terms, was involved with various groups such as MAG. I was on the Transportation Policy Committee. I've been a lobbyist for various interests of my own personal or professional career. I did want to compliment you on your efforts, and again, being here on a Saturday. I just finished a leadership conference where we would also meet for the weekend, and we talked about how odd we must be to take such a beautiful day and talk politics. But I do believe that that's really a part of the situation that has been lost in America. I attended the Occupy Phoenix event last Saturday. What I found more than anything is that's democracy in action. That's people coming to a forum to discuss their views and how they feel. And I'll take exception with Councilmember Buster's comments, is that the people decided to give you the responsibility, not our elected officials. Our elected officials have their own personal interests. I think this is about as fair as can be, and again, I applaud you for your efforts on a Saturday afternoon. In general, I did want to compliment you on your maps because of the balance. I noticed that overall in the state, we're 31% Democrats, 35% Republicans, and 32% other. So the balance of 4 Republican, 2 Democrat, and 3 competitive does seem to match that overall perspective. However, as I spoke the last time, I would offer that we've traded one salamander for another. In our congressional district, as you saw, Congressional District 2 going all the way out to the Hopi Nation being a little bit odd, to put it mildly. Now I find myself in Legislative District 13, which is another salamander with its head in my community. And that does not fit. As a real estate appraiser, I've done work throughout the state, and I look at that area of Welton, Mohawk, Hyder, the suburbs of Yuma, the Yuma Marine Air Corps Station, and find no community of interest with Litchfield Park or the environs. As mayor, we would meet on Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month, and I think they're still doing that, and those are the sounds of Tolleson, Litchfield Park, Goodyear, and Buckeye. And together we would map out strategies to approach not only our legislature, our congressional districts, but as well as MAG as being our primary interest. Some of the concerns I've got with the congressional district as it's proposed now, and again, it's much more compact, and I do applaud that. But if you look at the Competitiveness, which is my main goal, is competitive more than anything else. And 8, it's going to be 61% Republican and 38% or 39% Democrat. The districts, congressional districts that border us, you would find that Congressional District 4 has a very similar 64% Republican and 36% Democrat, while Congressional District 3 and 7, which also border our district, or proposed district, is 37% Republican and yet 62% Democrat. And then again, District 7 would be 32% Republican and 67% Democrat. And that's giving a lock to all the districts where I think competitiveness for each district would be to our advantage. And I find the same thing true in our legislative districts. Thank you for allowing me the time to go through all this. Our legislative district 13, we would have 40% Republicans and 25% Democrats, while the neighboring districts, such as 4, is 26% Republican and almost 39% Democrat. 19 is 19% Republican, almost 20%, and 40% Democrat. And then 29 is 21% Republican and 39% Democrat. And I would hope that some movement of lines could make those districts much more competitive, and that's been my goal. On your website, which I was reviewing this morning, I saw some maps proposed by Benny White, and I find his districts, both congressional and legislative, to be much more of the common interest. I didn't see any percentages associated with it for competitiveness, but as far as interests of communities, I find it much more compatible. Thank you for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carol Frizone, representing Self. And if you could tell us where you're from, that'd be great.
Fantastic, Chair Mathis. Excuse my voice, I had a cold and I can't seem to get rid of this frog. Chair Mathis and council and staff. We live in a county island near Litchfield Park.
If you could spell your name, sorry,
yes,
for the record.
Frison, first name with 2 R's and 2 L's. We live in a county island near Litchfield Park, and I'd like to address mainly LD 12 and proposed LD 29, and I'd like to address mainly items D, respect to communities of interest, and E, use of visible geographic features. And I sort of have a statement question here. I suppose that legislative districts must be wholly within a congressional district. That would be correct, right?
Do LDs have to be fully within a CD? Our legal counsel says no.
No, okay. If it were so, then I would also question the boundary between Congressional District 7 and 8. We live on 127th Avenue, which is halfway between El Mirage and Dysart. The westernmost boundary of LD 29, proposed LD 29, is Dysart. We consider our community to be Litchfield Park and parts of Avondale and Goodyear. That's where we shop regularly. Our doctor's in Avondale. We go to church in Litchfield Park. There is a large geographic boundary, the Agua Fria River, immediately to the east of El Mirage Road, along with its gravel pits and concrete batch plants. Immediately east of that, we have also a large area, which is not residential. We have the Goodyear, the Glendale baseball complex, and the Glendale Airport. So the new LD 29, which we're a part, we don't feel that that's our community. Our community, as I said before, is Litchfield Park, parts of Avondale, and parts of Goodyear. And so I guess that is basically what I'd like to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is Tom Matheson, representing Self from Goodyear.
thank you, Madam Chairperson, staff, and fellow citizens. My last name is Matheson, spelled M-A-T-H-E-S-O-N, first name common Tom, and I'm, as you said, representing myself from Goodyear. First thing I want you to know is I don't want your job, okay? A thankless job, very, very difficult. Today I only wish to speak on a very narrow issue. It's not going to be about the partisan part of this procedure or the minority-majority interest. I would wish to speak specifically about the communities of interest and the physical boundaries, and specifically for the city of Goodyear. As I think has already been attested to by our mayor and several of our council people, we're really a suburban area. Quite homogeneous, actually. When I moved to Goodyear 15 years ago, we had 10,000. Now we've got 65,000. So in the last 15 years, we've gained like 55,000 people, something like that. But we're pretty homogeneous. It's a suburban area. I would like to see us kept together, if I can, as a city. We are a community, as has been expressed. I think it's particularly awful that Estrella Mountain Ranch, which is a major master planned community in the south of Goodyear, which has been around for about 25 years, has now been separated totally from Goodyear in both the congressional and legislative districts. I think that we, as a community of Goodyear, are pretty, as I said, homogeneous. The exception might be that area of 67 square miles south of Estrella Mountain Ranch and the Estrellas, which was annexed in 2007. That's the Mobile area, which I can understand perhaps could be considered maybe more rural than the rest of us. But I would have two things that I would ask is that you keep the city of Goodyear together wherever you can. I think it's been expressed by many other speakers that we are very, very closely aligned with the rest of the West Valley and specifically the Southwest Valley, and we're trying to promote ourselves there. We have very little I can see in the common interest area with the Yuma area and Gila Bend and clear down to the border, which in the case of the congressional district, we're lumped in there with possibly 3/4 of the border. I just don't think that's at all a community of interest. And as far as the political boundaries, I would like those to be looked at a little bit better, because in the case of the congressional district, there's a line in there that appears to have been drawn by a drunken sailor. No offense to the people who did it. But in the case of the legislative, at least it follows I-10. But still, you're splitting us up. I would like to see us kept together as a city, because and keep us, if you can, in the West Valley or in central Arizona. And I just don't believe that we have too much in common with the areas that we're currently being suggested to be as a community with very much southwestern Arizona. And I thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine Baker, representing Self from Surprise. After Christine will be Tori Anderson and then Ed Casper.
Good afternoon. My name's Christine Baker, B-A-K-E-R, and I'm a resident of Surprise, a neighbor to the north of here. I wanted to speak about two things, about what's happened to Surprise as well as to, I'd like to address LD 13. Surprise has gone from having 2 legislative districts to 3, and I really have an issue with that. People have a hard enough time knowing what district they're in with 2, never mind 3. It's really cut the city in 3. Surprise, 2 decades ago, was about 25,000 people. It is now 117,000 as of this last census. So that's my number one concern. My second concern is, as my neighbors to the south in Goodyear and Buckeye and Avondale have so eloquently spoken, it really isn't right to take a city of Surprise, which is really has become very urban, and have it go 148 miles down to the outskirts of Yuma. It's just not a manageable district. I guess those are my 2 comments. Number one, and most important, want to thank you for the hard work you've done, and thank you for coming here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tori Anderson, representing Self from Goodyear. Oh, okay, thank you. How about Ed Casper, representing Self from Maricopa? He'll be followed by Jeffrey Rich.
That's Maricopa County. I actually live in Phoenix. The name Casper is spelled just like the ghost, C-A-S-P-E-R. Thank you for doing this absolutely thankless job. The last meeting of yours that I attended was over in Tempe when you were drawing what is now District 24. And I found that process to be fascinating. I want to let you know I did have a chance 10 years ago to speak with a number of the commissioners back in those days, and also with the demographer at quite a bit of length. I haven't had a chance to speak with you folks as much. Pardon?
Can you repeat that? The court reporter didn't hear it.
Oh, I said, I had a chance to speak with the commissioners and the demographer 10 years ago, and in speaking with them, it gave me a real insight, I think, into the kind of compromises that you have to make. And no matter what kind of a map you do come up with, you're going to be compromising. I've known Jim Buster, one of the former speakers here, for a number of years, and I really sympathize with a lot of what he had to say. And one of the things that the commissioners mentioned to me 10 years ago, and that he mentioned, is part of your job of drawing competitive districts is really complicated by the Voting Rights Act. It's an unfortunate byproduct of that whole thing, but you don't have any choice. And I hate to say it, but I understand and I appreciate why the Voting Rights Act is enacted. But maybe it's something that the Congress should look at. Instead of having to constantly strengthen things, maybe they can find ways to fine-tune it for competitiveness. No matter what you do, somebody's going to complain about it. And the more you hear complaints from both sides, the more you realize you're getting better maps. And I think that's one of the things that, as I see it, that I think you're coming close, because you're hearing complaints from both sides. I don't have a lot of specifics, but just a lot of philosophical waxing. I actually submitted things online, a little bit more detail about compactness. I would remind people, somewhat in the audience as well as here, that you guys would have a lot easier job if you were drawing the congressional districts in the state of Alaska. The state of Alaska has one congressional district. Just to give you an idea, the air distance from Ketchikan to Dutch Harbor, Unalaska in the Aleutians is 1,387 miles. The distance between Tucson and Page is about 314 miles by air. The distance from Seattle to Tucson is 1,216 miles. So that's a longer distance than what the representative in Congressional District 1 in Alaska is going to have to travel. So compactness is in the eye of the beholder. And to segue into the next part, isn't rural Arizona a community of interest? In many ways, they've been underrepresented in a lot of the maps because of the demographics. You have to come into Maricopa County to get population enough to fill out the districts. So you guys have a tremendous opportunity to not only draw one rural district, but two. And I think that's great. It's good that they can get better representation. But my big thing is competitiveness. And I couch the term competitiveness in a different word: accountability. Don't we want elected officials to be accountable? We're accountable at our jobs. To me, an election process is a job interview. There's a realtor named Russell Shaw who puts out an ad here in the Phoenix area. Says, I'm not bragging. I'm applying for a job. Isn't that what a politician is doing? They're applying for a job. But we hold people in jobs accountable. So the more competitive you can make the districts, the more accountable we, the people, can hold our elected representatives. And so that's one of the big reasons I think we need to try to work toward competitiveness and accountability. But that's all. You guys know where you can tweak. And I'm fully aware that you move a line one block, it affects 5 or 6 or 8 other districts. I saw you drawing District 24. I saw the compromises you were making to try to get to your aims in District 24. And you're going to create a salamander, a gerrymander. To me, you can gerrymander all you want for competitiveness. You can gerrymander all you want for communities of interest. But please, don't gerrymander for the reason the gerrymander was originally intended, which is incumbency protection. This is not an incumbency protection commission. This is a redistricting commission. So I really thank you for taking some time to listen to me. And again, all the best of luck. And I think that you guys and your staff don't get enough praise. And again, the more complaints you hear from both sides, I think you're going to find that you're drawing better maps. And maybe that's a good sign. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jeffrey Rich, representing Self from Avondale. After Jeffrey will be Gordon Posner, followed by Dorothy Schultz.
Madam Chair, my name is Jeffrey Rich, R-I-C-H. I'm from Avondale, and I'm also the chair of the Legislative District 12 Democrats. I'm here to address you today on the subject of fair and competitive districts. For the past 10 years, the voters of Arizona have been straddled with notoriously unfair districts intended to accomplish only one thing: increase and consolidate one party's power in our state. There are attempts to continue that course throughout this process, and that's unacceptable. The electorate of our state is nearly evenly divided, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The new districts must reflect that. Without fair and competitive districts, our state will continue to be governed not for the many, but for the few. I urge you not to buckle to the pressure from high-ranking officials and a few vocal voter groups. I further urge you to honor the desires of the electorate who overwhelmingly voted for fairness in the redistricting process with Prop 106. They didn't vote for power grabs or special interests. Thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gordon Posner, representing Self from Tolleson.
Good afternoon. Madam Chair, this is the third time I've addressed the Commission. If I'm not mistaken, the first time you've been here, so I want to thank you for the hard work you've done and tell you that the attacks that have been made on you personally should be taken as an indication that you're doing the job right. I am very much in favor of competitive districts. I'm in favor of competitive districts in part because, as the last speaker said, this is not supposed to be an incumbent districting committee. And I have to disagree with an earlier speaker who said he preferred to have the districts drawn by the legislature. No, because I prefer the current system where the people drawing the districts don't have a direct personal interest in the outcome, and I hope it stays that way. Competitiveness is important, not just depending on what party you're on, because even if you're in a so-called safe district, you lose if it isn't competitive. I currently am in 2 safe Democratic districts, and according to the maps, if I understand them correctly, I'm going to still be in safe Democratic districts, which in one sense is fine by me. You're moving me from what is, I believe, the 7th congressional district, previously the 3rd under your map, into what will be the new 7th district. And I happen to like that because it means I go from a district that is affiliated with Tucson to a district that's entirely within Maricopa County. So in terms of community of interests and the rest, that works out fine. But whatever party you're in, if you live in a safe district, in a sense, your vote doesn't count. Your representative only has to worry about the primary, and we all know primaries are generally governed by the most extreme of either side. I think this is one of the reasons there's so much partisanship and division in this country and in our Congress, because so many members, Democratic or Republican, come from safe districts. So I want to urge you to make competitiveness a very important part of what you do. Make the districts more competitive. I understand you have the Voting Rights Act and other things to consider, but in the long run, it's competitiveness that will make our democracy work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you mind spelling your name for the record? Sorry about that. Sorry, Marty.
P-O-S-N-E-R, and it's pronounced Posner.
Oh, Posner. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dorothy Schultz, representing Self and Neighbors from El Mirage.
First off, I want to thank you guys for serving. I have some appreciation for what you are doing. 1963 fall, I was a graduate student at Texas Christian. We worked with a group from other campuses, designing legislative districts and congressional districts for the state of Texas, anticipating Reynolds versus Sams and population equality becoming a criteria for representing. And you don't know how lucky you are to have computers now. It was hair-raising and trying to deal with rivers, highways, etc. I have a message from my 13-year-old grandson. He says, don't let the bullies win. When he's 18, he wants to vote in competitive districts. Now, he lives in El Mirage. He lives in Surprise. I live in El Mirage. There's about 2 miles between us. We all have common community interests, i.e., I substitute teach. His mother's a teacher. He's a student. His brothers and new baby sister are all going to be students. Now, we know the problems we had with Sun City voting down bond issues years ago, and they don't pay school taxes. El Mirage has no community interest with Sun City. We do have children there. We have a lot of interest with the West Valley here. Now, District 13 right now is not compact. It's all over the place. And El Mirage, Surprise, Litchfield Park, Goodyear, Avondale, all of our west side cities have a lot more in common than we have with LaPlace County. I would like to be able, as a doctorate in political science, to look at your results and say, by golly, we've got a competitive legislature and we've got congressional districts that are competitive for a change. In the 90s, I circulated petitions and helped draft up the initiative that created this commission. I felt totally betrayed 10 years ago when I saw the results. I went to a lot of meetings and I saw people telling you to tweak it here and tweak it there. I'm not going to tell you how to tweak it. I'm going to ask you to go back on your computers and get us as many competitive legislative districts and congressional districts as you can, so when my grandson, who's 13 now, turns 18 and he goes to vote, he can choose between a Democrat, a Republican, or whatever's running and have a choice. You know, I came back to Arizona after college teaching for years in 1985. I have yet to vote in a competitive election where it wasn't either safe Democrat or safe Republican. And I've lived in both districts. I've even been a member of the other party just to be able to vote in the primary. So how people vote in elections may be more indicative of the competitiveness than actual voter registration. Because when I lived in north central Phoenix, I had to register Republican if I had a choice for Congress or the legislature, because the other party didn't run any candidates. It was safe districts. In a democracy, there should be no safe districts. Because if we don't have competition, we don't have accountability. Thank you, and you know what? I really appreciate your service. You're going to catch a lot of criticism, but hang in there and don't be bullied, as Caleb says. Okay?
Thank you. That was my last request to speak form. Is there anybody who would like to address the commission whom I missed? Hearing, seeing none. I really appreciate everyone's respectfulness today. You've been wonderful, and you've provided really thoughtful, helpful information to us. We appreciate that, and especially, again, coming on a Saturday on a beautiful day like this. And we thank you for taking time to participate in the process. We really appreciate it. This is not your last opportunity to participate in the process. As you know, we're going to continue on this tour around the state. And in fact, on Monday is our next hearing, and that's going to be at 11 a.m. in Cells at the Tohono O'odham Utility Authority. And then Monday evening will be at the University of Arizona at 6 p.m. in Tucson. So the hearings continue all through next week, and if you can continue to come to more of them, please do. We appreciate it. Otherwise, you can follow us online and watch the hearings that way too. And with that, I think that will conclude our meeting. It's now 2:56 p.m. and this meeting's adjourned. Thank you again for coming.